With the recent news that the live-action remake of Disney's Beauty and the Beast has been nominated for 2 Oscar awards for Best Production Design and Best Costume Design, it got me thinking once again about this frankly disappointing and unnecessary modern adaptation. When the live-action Beauty and the Beast was initially announced, I have to admit that I was excited at the prospect. The original Disney animated classic is hands down Disney's best work to date, and it probably won't be beat based on their current track record and trajectory. The original Beauty and the Beast is a movie that had it all: stunning animation, fun and memorable songs, and more importantly, entertaining and relatable characters that made countless impressions on young people's minds. But the one thing that I was looking forward to the most was seeing Disney's new take on having a live actor portray the villain, Gaston. The first thing that stood out about this new interpretation of Gaston was the actor's physical size that they got to play the role, Luke Evans. While Luke Evans is a super entertaining actor and always seems to be in terrific physical shape, he's not the beefcake everyone imagined in their heads based on the animated character's massive bulk. While we already know that Evans can play dark action roles extremely well, just take a look at his underrated turn as Vlad the Impaler in Dracula Untold as one example. Gaston was merely not the best role for Evans to take on. But in all fairness, Evans wasn't really the problem. Well, he wasn't the main problem. Undoubtedly, Evans was miscast, but even with his small stature, I'm convinced that he could have made the role work under the right circumstances. The blame for this utter failure falls squarely at the feet of the writers and the director. This crucial character blunder comes down to one thing and one thing only. The Gaston we see in the live-action remake is not the same Gaston we saw in the animated version. While they may seem similar on the surface, there is one fundamental difference between the two interpretations of this beloved character. Quite simply, in the animated version, Gaston was a hunter, whereas in the remake, Gaston was characterized as a soldier. While this may seem like a small detail, the ramifications of this character alteration becomes a huge problem. It turned the live-action Gaston into one of the most unlikable characters in recent memory. The best villains are almost always likable. We don't like what bad guys do, but we generally like who the bad guys are. They at the very least entertain us. Just look at the Dark Knight's Joker. We like him even if we're sickened by his actions. The same applies to the animated version of Gaston. He's a very likable person, even though he's detestable and a pompous blowhard who gets what he deserves in the end. But what does Gaston's being a hunter in the animated version even mean? Why is a small detail like that so important? The answer is duality, or polarization, or yin and yang, the hero versus villain dynamic. Take your pick. In the animated version, the prince is a beast, while Gaston is a hunter. There is an almost tangible connection between a creature of the wild and a hunter. When you take the Gaston character and turn him into a soldier, it becomes pretty clear what happens. The connection between the yin and the yang is shattered. Now there is no connection between the beast and the hunter. It removes the soul of their final altercation when you remove one side of the equation. To drive this point home, let's take a look at the climactic battle at the end of the animated version in more detail. We see Gaston using a particular weapon, a bow and an arrow. I don't think this was a coincidence on the filmmaker's part. What weapon better symbolizes the art of hunting other than a bow and arrow? A bow requires physical strength, skill, and stamina to operate, whereas Luke Evans' Gaston simply uses a pistol for the duration of the battle on the tower. Not only is the animated Gaston skilled with a bow, but it's also impressive that Gaston can take on the beast without having to rely solely on his weaponry. In this final scene between the beast and Gaston, we see two physically and mentally worthy opponents facing off against one another, a primal creature versus a lethal huntsman. This hero and villain dynamic begs for there to be a standoff between these two formidable foes. It seems inevitable that these two individuals who have never before met through the course of the story must come together by the end. They must resolve the unseen friction of their polarized relationship, for without a resolution to this opposition, there can be no finality to the story. There is an uneasiness throughout the animated film, because while the Beast and Belle are frolicking around in the snow, we know in the back of our minds that there is a hunter somewhere, waiting for his chance to fulfill his manifest destiny. There will be no peace until this friction is removed. Compare the live-action remake with the animated version in the context of the hunter-beast relationship, and you'll see what I'm talking about. In the original film, these two characters could fight face-to-face, whereas in the live-action version, Gaston was useless without his flintlock pistol. For the entire battle sequence, he's exclusively relying on his firearms before the bridge he's standing on, just from sheer chance, gives out and he plunges to his death. In the animated feature, the striking imagery of Gaston falling to his death after literally stabbing the beast in the back paints a much different picture. Even though he rejected the beast's offer of mercy, the animated Gaston still had enough hubris to confront the beast hand to hand, whereas Luke Evans' Gaston shot the beast from a distance like a coward, not a proud hunter. There was no hunter-prey dynamic. Gaston merely shoots the beast several times, which negates any of the suspense or atmosphere that the animated version expertly builds over the course of the battle. In the animated version, we see a dramatic reversal where the hunter becomes the hunted when the beast finally decides to fight back. There is no dramatic turning point with Luke Evans and the beast. There was no atmospheric lightning storm, and the delivered lines in the live-action version are emotionally hollow when compared to the animated version.
Go. Get out. Get out.
Going even further with the Luke Evans interpretation, the filmmakers went out of their way to portray Gaston as a villain by having him strand Maurice in the forest to be eaten by wolves. This act of evil utterly defeats the purpose of who Gaston is supposed to be. Gaston shouldn't be the villain for the sake of being the villain. His whole purpose as a hunter should be to kill the beast. Being a hunter is who he is, and that antithesis to the beast is what makes him a memorable villain. The animated Gaston saw himself as the hero of the story. Because of the beast, he lost what he considered to be his future with Belle as his wife. Killing the beast was a mission of revenge, it was personal. How dare this creature of the wild, this very thing that he hunts for a living, steal away his love? Luke Evans' Gaston, on the other hand, was evil for the sake of being evil long before he decided to assault the haunted castle. Not that the animated Gaston was a saint leading up to the final act, but he was never portrayed as a heartless murderer. In the live-action version, he was so detestable that he lost any semblance of being a relatable human being. In this regard, it's ironic that the animated version of Gaston was more human than the live-action portrayal, since Gaston was crucial to the prince's emergence as the hero. It's easy to point the finger at Gaston as being the villain, but the beast is not free from moral shortcomings. Up until the final confrontation, the beast was more of a villain than Gaston ever was. It was partially because of Gaston's need for revenge that the beast was ultimately transformed. Without a fallen hunter, there couldn't have been a redeemed prince, which is something Disney understood once upon a time.